Is the Sony a7 III still a viable option as a good hybrid camera here in 2021? This camera is about 3 years old now. There are some more recent cameras put out by Sony that match or beat the specifications of the a7 III. Why would you look into buying the a7 III then? And in this video, I would like to talk about some of the reasons why I think this camera is one of the best cameras for the money on the market. Fair enough. Down with the hardest of heads. This is Timmy J, Hot Pixel. Everybody, welcome. This video is going to be about the a7 III. Is it too old to consider purchasing in 2021? Or is this a fantastic option, being that it's available for the most affordable price I've personally ever seen it at? This camera, you can get it right now. The body only it's about $1,600 to $1,700 USD. And that's the cheapest I've really ever seen this camera. When I purchased it, I think it was somewhere around $2,200. That was pretty shortly after it was released, so the price has dropped pretty substantially. This is a full frame camera from Sony. This is a 24.2 megapixel, BSI, backside illuminated, CMOS sensor. Really nice sensor in this camera. Fantastic for low light, fantastic for all kinds of different things. Really good sensor. It has a Bionz X imaging processor, which is also good. It's a good processing system to get the files to your SD card and saved properly. It has 10 FPS continuous shooting, which is good. There are a lot of cameras that shoot a lot slower than this one, so it holds its own. One of the things I really love about the Sony a7 III is when I'm not using manual focus, the autofocus system of the a7 III is really fantastic. It has a 693 phase detection autofocus point and 425 contrast detect autofocus point autofocus system, which covers basically the whole sensor. You get really good autofocus performance with this hybrid system. Other companies out there on the market, for example Panasonic, they are stubbornly stuck in a contrast only autofocus system, which is really kind of, in my opinion, hurting them in the camera industry. They really need to figure out how to get phase detection into their cameras as well. That's just my opinion on that, and it is one of the reasons that I reach for a Sony camera over a Panasonic generally if I'm using autofocus or needing autofocus or wanting autofocus. I will use a Sony camera over a Panasonic pretty much any day of the week. But, you know, again, if I'm shooting in manual focus, it's really not going to make a difference. This camera is a fantastic low light performer. It's an absolute beast in the dark. I shoot a lot of low light stuff to begin with. I've gotten into astrophotography, nightscapes, cityscapes, long exposure. I do some work with some light trails and abstract sort of images created with low light scenarios. It's kind of artistic and not necessarily something that everyone is going to be into, but I have fun shooting it, and that's what's important, I think, is in this world that we live in, we have to have fun with what we're doing. And if I'm passionate about photography and videography, I want to be able to artistically show my own style, my own way that I see the world and what I view as worthy of display to others. This camera has a really good high ISO performance, so Again, like I said, it's a really good camera in low light scenarios. Often in astrophotography, people that aren't into astrophotography may not know this, but when you're trying to photograph the stars, you want it to be absolutely pitch black, as dark as possible. The darker, the better. So moonlight and noise pollution from nearby cities and whatnot can ruin your shot. This camera allows you to shoot in the complete dark and get just really results that, at least for me, when I open the file up, I'm like, wow, holy, that is incredible. I can't believe I took that photograph. This is rated for 15 stops of dynamic range. Pretty good, pretty solid. 15 stops of dynamic range is pretty decent these days. You will find cameras that have a little bit better dynamic range, but most cameras' dynamic range is worse than this. This camera has 5-axis in-body image stabilization. Sony call steady shot inside. This particular implementation of IBIS, I would say, is good. It's not great, but it's not bad either. The screen on this camera, as well as a lot of Sony cameras, they tend to skimp a bit on the screen. This is a 3-inch screen, and it's a 922,000 dot screen. And this day and age, that's poor. That's pretty poor. Generally, we're talking 2 point something M dot screens are average, or what you're seeing on most cameras like this. So, but it honestly doesn't make that much of a difference. I don't think. I can still compose, I can still tell what I'm shooting, it's just fine. And also, it's a tilting screen. It doesn't flip forward, it just will tilt up or down. It's not the best implementation of a screen. It has a 2.36 million dot EVF, which is okay. Some of Sony's newer cameras are a lot higher resolution EVF, but again, this is an entry-level full-frame camera. And for what it is, I think the screen and EVF are satisfactory. I've heard a lot of folks talk negatively about the grip or ergonomics holding the a7 III in the hand. All of those complaints, I feel, are unfounded. I have little tiny ninja hands, so I don't know, but it feels really good in my hand. I know the ninjas are going to take offense to that. Anywho, feels really good in my hand. I like it. I can understand some folks with bigger hands may not have a place for the pinky, but I don't know if this is just because I've shot Sony cameras for the longest amount of time of any camera companies I have. So I've developed this weird way of holding the camera with the pinky underneath. It's not for everyone. Some folks, I'm sure, would freak out, and they're going to want the battery grip on the bottom and all that. And sure, those accessories are necessary for certain types of shooting, absolutely. And, I'll use them periodically, but just without the battery grip, for some reason, my pinky finger fits just perfectly underneath. I get a nice, stable, I don't know. Something about the way you hold this camera using that little pinky technique, I don't know. I feel like it makes it more stable. I may be bugging out on that, and it might not make a hill of beans worth of a difference. But I like the ergonomics of it. I've heard people complain about it, but I really feel like it feels nice and solid and good in the hand, and use that pinky technique if you have little ninja hands like me. This camera here, along with a lot of other Sony cameras this day and age, have the FZ100 battery, which is a pretty good battery. It, in the a7 III, is rated for, I believe, 710 shots. on a full charge. So in comparison to some other cameras and the amount of shots you can get per battery, it's pretty good. Video, again, when you're shooting photos and videos together, back and forth between them, I've found that the battery life is generally very good. Just bring an extra battery and you shouldn't have to worry too much. This camera is a really pretty capable hybrid camera. Not only is it going to produce some great photos for you, but it will also give you some great video results. This camera shoots 4K video, 24p, and 30p. A lot of the newer cameras out there on the market nowadays will shoot at higher 4K frame rates than that. There's still a lot of people out there that, you know, shoot in 1080p and they're completely fine with 1080p. There's nothing wrong with 1080p, you know, so the 1080p on this camera is available in 120 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, and 24 frames per second. Really great. Sony also have a feature known as S&Q, stands for slow and quick. You can basically speed up your clip or slow down your clip. You could have that slowed down version or that sped up version saved directly to your SD card already slowed for you. The bit rate for that is a little lower than the taking and filming 1080 120 and slowing it in post yourself. You know, I mean, if you don't have a comparable 1080p 120 clip slowed down to compare the two of them, it doesn't make any difference. I've gotten some pretty good usable results using S&Q on Sony cameras. Handy, you know, it's more of a handy thing. I don't really use it all that often. I would rather film at the higher frame rate and slow it down in post-production, but that's just me. In this camera here, you have Sony's creative styles as well as their picture profiles. Creative styles or creative looks is what they're known as on the more recent Sony cameras, are basically a preset or filter application to your JPEG files. Generally speaking, I'm not a big utilizer of the creative looks or creative styles, but I do use Sony's picture profiles when trying to capture high dynamic range scenes. I may change my picture profile accordingly. But just having the option of the picture profiles is really nice. You know, having a log format that you can work with to kind of really get the most out of your image is nice. It's a nice little feature to have, picture profiles. The various picture profiles I commonly use when I'm trying to capture high dynamic range scenes. I will use S-Log2 or S-Log3 and then take care of the footage in post to get the most out of the dynamic range of this camera. This camera is really not the camera if you're looking to vlog. Yeah, if you are a vlogger, this is not the camera for you, okay? There's no forward-facing screen, so you would have to enable some mirror hack or external monitor situation or some solution to be able to monitor your video. Not a good vlogging camera. Let's just get that out of the way. Vloggers, don't buy this camera, okay? This is a great photography camera, and it is a great video camera. Just not for vlogging, really. There are much better options for that out there. A lot of other cameras way better than this one for vlogging. This guy right here on here is the Sony's 90mm f2.8 macro. I'll be doing a video about this lens. This is a really awesome lens. Just, I don't know, I'm not really that big of a macro photography buff, but I'm starting to kind of get into it. This lens has made me much more interested in macro photography. It's also a great portrait lens. We're not talking about this lens in this video, but anyways, all I'm saying is this big long lens on here, this is the 90mm macro, and the lenses aren't all this big, so you can get a smaller lens for your a7 III. Anywho, I want to touch on something I alluded to previously in another video, and that is Sony cameras, the APS-C camera, full frame camera, and even their cinema line all take the E-mount. It is the whole one mount premise. This basically creates three different types of E-mount lenses. There are those designed for APS-C, there are those designed for full frame, and then there are cinema designed lenses, all with the E-mount. On the full frame cameras, I don't use glass designed for APS-C size sensors. It's a personal choice, and the reason for it is that I don't want to put a physical limitation in front of my sensor. I want my sensor to be able to capture as much light as possible. I am not trying to crop it all off with an APS-C size piece of glass. I would much rather use full frame glass and get the most out of the full frame sensor. That's just me. There are folks that shoot with APS-C lenses on full frame cameras. It can be done. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I will use the full frame glass on the APS-C sized sensor bodies because you can get the 1.5 times crop factor on your focal length. So if you're getting a full frame camera, invest in full frame glass. You're not putting a limitation in front of your sensor. And yes, there have been a couple releases from Sony that match all the specifications or beat all the specifications of the a7 III. So why in 2021 would you look at purchasing this camera in comparison to those others? The other cameras I'm talking about are, for example, the a7C. Going to be a little more money. Yes, you do get a flip screen, but you lose this nice EVF that I find very handy to have on the a7 III. It may not be the most expensive or feature-packed camera that Sony offer nowadays. There are higher resolution models. There are also better video models. However, if you go in one direction or the other and you go, say, with a higher resolution camera from Sony, you're going to be paying more money. And the same is true for video. If you want better video quality than the a7 III offers and you're looking to go for an a7S III, again, your price is going to jump up, $1,500 more now that this is on sale. So, anyways, there is so much trash talk out there on the internet about Sony's menu system. And yes, Sony have recently changed their menu system with some of the newer cameras out on the market. However, all of the older Sony cameras have a horrible reputation for incredibly difficult menu systems. Don't fear the Sony menu system. Embrace the Sony menu system. That's what I did. And honestly, I've grown to love the Sony menu system more than any other manufacturer menu system out there. It is known to be one of the worst, but I've grown to love it. And after you use it and you've been through every page and every tab, and you will feel right at home with this menu system. At least I do. I mean, and I'm not a special person. I've just used this menu system quite a bit. And after using it quite a bit, I've found that it's worked very well for me. The menu system, you just go through it a little bit, spend a few minutes with it. You will learn it. You can customize your My menu, your function menu, and you can customize all the function buttons on your camera to operate how you want it to operate. That's one of the beautiful things about these cameras is the customization, the ability to You can make this camera so it's specifically tailored to shoot to your needs. Once you start shooting with it, it's fantastic. Great experience. Unlike some APS-C size sensor cameras from Sony that lack the front command dial and don't have a joystick, the Sony a7 III has the joystick. It has the front command dial. Has a much better EVF when compared to the APS-C counterparts. It also has the ability to shoot to 2 card slots, which the APS-C Sony cameras currently don't offer. Ultimately, the bad things about this camera, again, it doesn't have a flip screen, and the rear LCD is not the highest resolution. One of the little things that I don't care for about this camera are the port doors. They dangle stupidly when you are utilizing them, and they're not the best quality. I much prefer the doors that like open right up and have like a weather little sealing gasket. Just makes me feel a little better using the camera out in inclement weather. Again, the port doors on the a7 III are not good in comparison to some of the other cameras out there on the market. They are average at best. The reason I'm making this video is because I think that even though it's a little old, when this camera was released 3 years ago, it pretty much shook up the industry. All other camera manufacturers then had to get their crap together in order to make an answer to the a7 III. And here we are 3 years later, and we are just now starting to see companies putting out cameras at this price point that compete directly with the a7 III. And still some of them fall short. Or some of them are better, but a lot more money. So this is a great value right now, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, is because I love this camera. I've been shooting with this camera for a couple years now. I've grown quite attached. It's a entry-level full-frame camera, so you would think that performance-wise it's going to be mediocre. And I have to say, the results I've gotten from this camera are anything but mediocre in comparison to photographs and videos from other cameras with, say, smaller sensors or just other cameras in general. The majority of the cameras that I own can't hold a candle to this as far as results in performance go. That's pretty good. That's pretty high praise. I do not hesitate at all recommending the Sony a7 III for anybody getting into photography, getting into videography. This is a very, very great option for individuals who are looking to get into the professional realm of photography and videography. If you are looking to start making some money with the camera, you're learning all of the different ins and outs of photography and videography, this entry-level full-frame camera from Sony is one of the best options out there. Workhorse. This thing is a workhorse. This thing is a breadwinner. Make some money. But go buy yourself a Sony a7 III and make yourself some money with the fantastic results you get. And you can thank me later. I appreciate you so much for joining today. Timmy J, Hot Pixel, and I want to say my soul thoroughly appreciates all of your souls. I hope today's video will help you decide whether or not the Sony a7 III is the right option for you. I'm confident that if you do go with the Sony a7 III, that you will be very pleased with the results that you get. But anyways, I talk a lot about gear on this channel. I recommend a lot of gear. I shoot with a lot of different gear, learn the ins and outs of a lot of different cameras and all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, it comes down to us and what we know and what we choose to implement as far as techniques, as far as composition and things like that. The camera body and lens are not going to make those decisions for us. Our end result is going to be up to us as photographers and videographers. What we end up with is that what we wanted to end up with? And I think that this camera is a great camera that will help you get what you want. It's helped me get what I want. Even though it's a little older, you can also find probably a good number of used copies of this camera on the market. That may not be a bad option to save a few bucks. Really good camera. Entry-level full frame or not, this is a really, really good option even in 2021. Fair enough.